Everest is going to go ahead and try to get the transmission pulled out of our other diesel Ranger so that we can get that fixed and working and operable. We've had it kind of in the shop hanging out for a little bit and just needing to get to it. We have the parts for it, so we just need to take care of it. So he's going to get working on that. Ola's doing a little bit of tidying and clean up and organizing with some things. And before I get in there to start doing shelving while they're doing all that, I'm getting real anxious about figuring out this dozer. I've run it a couple of times, not in enough way to actually like test anything out functionally very well. It's had many hoses that were rotten and broken and stuff. So I've got the hoses all rounded up. I replaced a couple of them, a couple more blue. So now I've got the last of them here. I'm just anxious to get an idea of what this machine's gonna need. We cleaned up the firewood pile back here that we had, and I kind of got things prepared a little bit back here with the excavator the other day. And I'm gonna throw these last couple of hoses on real quick and just kind of get a feel for it. I'm gonna go ahead and get the hydraulics all on there and get everything checked over a little bit real quick. Make sure that it's gonna function. Probably fire it up and see what I can do about pushing some of this dirt from back here and pulling it this way. And I'm going to pull it right across this space and push it right off the hill over there. I know the engine has a little bit of a misfire. I know that first gear doesn't seem to engage. So that's the low torque gear. But second gear seems to engage. I don't know about leaks or anything yet, really. I adjusted the brakes on it a little bit to make sure that they cut and work. Let's put it together and see what we can do. Okay, I got the hoses back on, and I had to make sure to put a couple of the shields back on so that those hoses don't get caught in the tracks. Right down here, these hoses come forward and they would easily get caught in the tracks. So I just put a couple of those back on to hold them in place. I'm gonna fire it up, see what functions, see if it'll turn around and move any dirt. I don't know.
Okay, let's see. Is this your firing it up?
Well, it may have a low battery. I can hear it engaging, not.
How did you run out of battery? What's your evaluation?
What's the eval, doctor?
Yeah, it didn't do anything. I think you made more of a mess.
Yeah, yeah.
Looks like as soon as you drop the blade, it'd just drop even further.
Well,
Or as soon as it hit a curve or curb, it like didn't level out or something. I don't know.
well, the evaluation would be, I'm pretty sure that the engine misfires injectors, because the longer I've run it, the more it warms up, the smoother it gets on the low end all the way up. At the very top end, it still has some misfire, but the smoking is cleared out and all that. It may have just been gummed up injectors and gummed up cylinders from not being run very hard. And it had all brand new fuel in it, so it's all good, new, clean fuel. So I feel better about the engine than I did initially. I think a lot of that's cleaned out. It probably needs an overhead adjustment and some injector work, and we're good. Maybe a little bit of timing and tuning. But the transmission is going to need some work. First gear doesn't engage at all. Second gear engages with a little bit of rev, but once it starts to warm up a little bit, second gear starts to fall off. There's not really any push power. That's what you were seeing, is like start pushing, even with just the slightest resistance, it would just stop me, and then I have to like either raise the blade or back up and get moving again. And once it was moving and engaging, it would go okay until it met with much resistance. So definitely going to need some transmission work to see what's wrong with first gear, and it may have a weak pump in the transmission. Might just be clutch packs are worn out, but I think we'll probably end up overhauling the transmission.
Is that pretty expensive?
For a shop to do, yeah.
Oh, for you? Okay.
For a shop to do, there's a lot of labor involved.
Okay.
But it'll
So
be
to clear this out, you're just gonna have to use the excavator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. The steering's not quite functioning properly, and I think as part of that has to do with the transmission not having enough drive. I think it's not going to do us any good for today or for this cleanup and prep. Not enough control to do any good with it. So we'll do the pushing off with the excavator. There's not too much to push off, just maybe 2 truckloads worth of dirt is all to push off. So it won't be too bad pushing it with the excavator, but we'll need to bring this in this winter and spend a good month on it. Because this is where the transmission is.
Oh, so you have to take quite a bit of parts apart.
So it has to come out of here, which means a lot of stuff has to come off to get out of the way to get it clear, so it'll lift out of there.
Okay.
So we'll pull that out, pull it all apart, and just rebuild it. I'm sure we'll just put brand new clutch packs and seals and bearings and plates and wear components and everything, and see if the pump is probably a gear pump on this, and so we'll probably just replace the transmission pump, a few things like that, make sure it's good to go.
Okay.
I think the engine's going to clear up with a little bit of work. I think all that's going to really take is maybe an overhead adjustment, some injector work, and check timing and tuning.
Well, why don't you repark this thing?
Yeah, I'm going to need to.
It's going to take you like 2 hours just to turn it around somewhere.
I ended up leaving the dozer parked next to the shop the other day until I decided kind of where I wanted to park it. And after a few days, I just brought it forward and parked it kind of out of the way a little bit. But when I did that, I noticed something different, and it was acting a little inconsistent and finicky. So I had to take my diagnostic step just one step further. When I first got it here and I drove it up from the bottom up to the shop, transmission engaged really good in second and third gear, and I drove it up no problem. The only problem I had was the cutting brakes wouldn't quite lock and engage very well. I really kind of had to jam them. When I adjusted the brake bands, then I noticed it would turn and react appropriately. But the last couple times I've run it, it won't quite turn. It doesn't want to. When I push the brake on one side, I can feel it engage, but it's enough that it stops the whole machine. So that got me thinking maybe that the transmission was slipping. fluid was up, and I thought, well, lots of things here, right? There's could be pressure in the clutch packs not holding and not engaging fully, either a worn pump, a weak pump, a plugged up filter that's causing a cavitation or a lack of fluid to build up in the pump. But this last time I ran it, I noticed a little bit more inconsistency, and I don't know how else to say it, just finicky. The linkage for forward and reverse is right here, and it's forward and reverse, and you twist it to go and slide it, twist his throttle and slide his ranges. But at any rate, what I noticed was if I fiddled with the shifter a little bit, it would engage a little bit better, and for a minute, and then it would disengage, almost like it was not falling into detent and not staying in gear. That got me to pause and think for a second, and I looked at this, and it's actually got a couple of cables that feed into the transmission for the shift mechanism, and all of that is handled through several linkages up here, and everything has got a ton of movement. All that comes into this valve body, and I thought that was just a regular valve body, but from the looks of it, I don't think so, because it's got cables coming in the bottom, and the linkages come into the top in that same box. So I'm going to pull the cover plate off of that and take a look at things in there before I go worrying about diving deep into the transmission. I may replace a whole bunch of linkages and tighten all this up. There's a bunch of little ball joints in there. There's all these little ball joints, and everything has got play and movement. That's throttle cable over here, but you can see how much play is in all of that. And then forward and reverse is that shaft. So I don't believe that shaft actually goes into anything. I think it's just a pivot point for the linkage, which is down inside of there, turning on that. And then this one has the same kind of thing. This arm moves inside of here, but there's the second cable down here. So I'm going to pull this cover plate off and just take a look at what's in behind there and how that's all connected. Wondering if we don't just have a bad set of linkages everywhere, causing a lot of play. By the time you add up play in each one of these linkages, that can add up to a whole lot of movement or lack of movement. Grab the wrong size socket. We'll get the right one. So let's see what's behind here. Okay, my suspicions were correct. All kinds of linkages. Most of that linkage actually looks most of this inside here looks pretty tight. And it does just have cable operations. And those come down here to the valves just inside of the top of that transmission body. They wrap through here and come back up into here. So there's, I don't know, at least a chance that we may just have some linkages out of adjustment. Sensor there that's broken off somewhere. So I guess we'll do a little bit more diagnostic operation before we put it in the shop and go to tearing into the transmission. I'm fine to rebuild the transmission if that's what it takes, but Boy, I sure prefer to go through all of the diagnostic of everything I can. So I think we'll buy some new ball ends on a couple things there and see if we can't tighten some of that a little bit better. And then get into the transmission top and see what and how those valves are being activated by the cable inside, and see if maybe something's just out of adjustment, out of alignment, or if it's just worn out. This is a 1000cc Cobra diesel engine for this Ranger. So I think while we got the transmission out, little fatter gaskets, increase the nozzle size on the injectors and turn up the pump. And we'll add a turbo while we're at it.
I don't even know what language you're talking to me. What does that even mean? What is that supposed to mean?
Go fast parts.
Go fast forwards. For what reason?
Well, it'll take it up from about a 22 horsepower up to maybe like 35 or 38.
Again, I don't even know what that means. So what is, so...
He just wants more power.
It means vroom vroom.
No, it doesn't. It's been fine. I like how little old lady putt it does.
Oh.
I like how it just...
You don't want it to be vroom vroom, you want it to be putt putt?
Yeah, it's fine the way it is. What do you want to do with it? Where are you going with it?
Just saying, it'd be fun.
I'm driving it to my friend's house. I want him to go fast.
We're not here to have fun. We're here to work, get work done.
So we can get work done faster if it don't go putt-putt.
Oh, that's a good answer.
No. How much is it going to cost?
A couple grand.
No, we're not doing
They gave it to me.
They gave it to me.
That's how all those social media posts are, right?
You just gave it to me.
Like, how much did it cost? Then they gave it to me. No, they didn't. How much? They gave it to me, I swear.
No, but for real, how much would it cost?
I don't know.
Like thousands? Hundreds?
No, it's just a 2-cylinder little diesel engine. It can't be thousands.
Why are the goats so mad? They're even mad at your idea. The goats are mad at your idea.
No going fast.
No
Only
going fast. Putt putt.
Everest got the transmission pulled out of that machine yesterday. Did a pretty good job getting it out. So we drained the oil and then it's ready to get split. This is the part we got to change. It's the reverse gear. These little engagement cogs over time, eventually, those square shoulders right here get rounded off. And then when you put it into reverse, it jumps. And that's the sound of a click, 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 and a grind is that tooth jumping rather than locking and holding in place for reverse. So it's one of those beautiful things where 4 hours tearing it out, an hour on the bench, 4 hours putting it back in for an $80 part that makes the machine completely worthless. So we'll get it in there, get the gear replaced, check over our detents and make sure the springs and everything are set. The detent locations are nice and tight and everything's in good shape. Put it back together, put it back in the hole. We got some new oil put in it. And then this diesel will be ready to use. Everything else, we've used it at times and it works okay, but there's just no reverse. So it's complicated when you're up here on the mountain. You got to make sure you pull in a way that you don't have to rely on reverse. So we'll get that fixed and then it'll be ready to go to work doing some firewood hauling. All right, so this is the part that we knew was bad. And if you can see here, see the tooth right there, it's really rounded off. And it should be a nice square shoulder on each of those. So this was the replacement gear we bought for it. And I don't know if I can show that well, but I'll try. You can see a nice square shoulder there, and then a rounded off shoulder there to compare each of those. So that's the part we bought to replace it. It's the correct part. It's good. But now that I'm into it, I'm feeling like I probably ought to replace this other one too. Because this one here, it's not nearly as bad, but you can see it's also rounded off a little bit there and there on those 3 teeth. I'd like to just put it back together, but it's enough of a pain in the butt to get the transmission out. Now's the time to replace that gear while we're in it. They're pretty readily available. I think when I ordered this gear, it was like 2 days out and we had it. This is the collar that aligns into those cogs. And you can see this one on this collar is slightly rounded there too. The other side's good. So I might go ahead and get a couple extra parts here. This locks in here. And so when that doesn't have a square shoulder, it can come up and round off and slip out. So when you see this one, having been in here, you can just see it doesn't take much pressure and it wants to jump up and come over because those are all round. There's just not much material to bite and hold. Versus the good new gear, and you can see how square that shoulder is, how well the whole tooth bites into it. So, that's the bad gear. We might get a new shift collar and the other gear as well, just to make sure that they're good. The other one isn't too bad. Doesn't look like it's worn in nearly like that at all. So that's the 3 gears. This one's just barely starting to round that corner, and I think that's more from somebody dropping it into gear and grinding it in versus popping out. So we'll look up some parts real quick and see what we can come up with. Okay, the only other part that I see in here that's got any issues is on our shift detent. So this all comes together in here inside those sprockets, but this is the arm, and it's supposed to drop into these little detents to hold it in gear. As you shift it, it rotates and locks in and out of that gear into those little detents. It's supposed to have this little pin and roller wheel on the end in that spot right here. So it acts as like a little, supposed to be a little wheel that rolls, so that as this rotates, that wheel rolls in and out of those teeth appropriately. And that was broken off and loose inside the housing, which explains why it always felt pretty loose and easy on the shifting. With that broken, this spring is not going to hold it down into the detent well, because it doesn't have enough pressure against it. We are going to need to get this detent arm while we're at it. So I have to look that up, get that part. All the rest of everything looks good in the shifting. All of the detent rail looks good. Everything there. Shift forks are good. Not any wear and tear on them. Bearings all feel good. So we're gonna go ahead and get the extra couple of parts we need before putting it back together. I was hoping to tear it down, change this gear, put it back together, have it ready to go so that when Everest got home from school today, he could start putting it back. But we're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to order a couple more parts and wait till they get here, and then we'll put it together and finish it up. So I got all the transmission back together and I got it in the hole and bolted up a little bit and a couple of things initially. And then Everest has been working on that pretty good to get everything back together. It's a good learning curve for him because it's been a few days since he took it apart. And so now he's trying to remember where everything went and all the bolts and everything like that. Since he took it apart. And so now he's trying to remember where everything went and all the bolts and everything like that. But we noticed that when we took the bed off, the little gas cylinder that helps assist the lift on the end, it's got these 1/2-inch clevis. This side was broken off. So it wasn't connected. It would come up and it would just come all the way up. And there was nothing to hold the gas shock in place to keep it assisting. So we're building a new one out of steel because I don't want to pay for something that I can build, mostly. So the 1/2-inch bore is already cut. I've got my pilot hole drilled. I'm going to drill that out for the appropriate size for the tap. And then we'll tap that to the metric thread and we'll thread this on the end and that'll give us back the clevis end that we need to finish that up. And Everest is going to go ahead and put this together. We went in to pick up the drive belt and they did not have the drive belt. It's a week out to order it. So we'll probably just go ahead and get it ordered and going. I do have my Get Me Home belt from the 570 that doesn't quite fit right, but it does fit, and it'll be good enough to get us out of the shop today. So we're gonna put that belt on and get it at least maneuvered and out of the shop, and then we'll pull it back off and have it ready for the new belt when it shows up in a couple of days. We can slap it on, put the cover on, and be done. All right, we got it out. We used the jack to pull the back end around and steer it and get it pulled out of there. And then the drive belt isn't available right now. We went into our local dealer and I thought maybe they'd have it in stock, but they didn't. So we've left the cover off for now. I'm gonna order the belt tonight. We'll have it in probably 3 or 4 days, and I'll put it on and then put the cover on, and then it'll be ready to go. Well, the new belt showed up this morning, so I'm gonna hurry and throw that on real quick and have this part finally wrapped up. I think I'm just gonna pull that secondary pulley. Just because I'm here, I think it'll do a lot easier just to quickly pull the secondary pulley off and then change that belt. Yeah, a lot easier. Guess I just had to hold my mouth just right. Okay, well, that's done. We're excited to use this thing. It's the full width, 60-inch machine instead of the 570 we have is what they call a mid-size. So the cab is skinnier and the bed is skinnier. The wheelbase is the same, but the cab up gets skinnier. So this one's being a lot bigger, being the diesel engine, it rides smoother, just drives a little better. And the big bed is much wider. I think it's almost a foot wider than the little 570 we have. So it's good to have this one back in order just in time for firewood hauling season. We have used it off and on in the past. We've had it for a couple of years now. We bought them at the same time at the auction. And we've used this one, but without the reverse going into gear, it's hard to use. Sometimes you could get it to go into gear, into reverse well enough to be able to maneuver. And other times you had to like pull up a hill and coast in reverse to get turned around, and a few things make it a little complicated, but now it's all functioning perfect and working, driving good. So it'll be really good to have.